All right, today we are diving into a really powerful argument from the 19th century that asks a pretty provocative question. What if the age of miracles never actually ended, but was just, forgotten? Let's get into it.
So think about this. It's a question that has really divided people for centuries. A lot of us were taught that the power to perform miracles was the special gift, something that just ended with the original apostles. But what if that whole assumption is wrong? What if that power was never actually taken away?
Well, back in 1882, an author named A.J. Gordon wrote a book called The Ministry of Healing, and he made this super compelling case. He argued that the age of miracles, it never truly ended. Instead, he claimed that a vital inheritance was lost, not because it was taken away by God, but simply because it was forgotten by the church.
Gordon kind of frames his whole argument like a legal case, built on evidence from scripture and from reason. His main claim is that the church has basically surrendered a primitive birthright.
So his opening argument is that we've been reading this imaginary expiration date into some really key promises. He says no, these promises were meant to be perpetual, just as active in his day or even today as they were in the very beginning.
So Gordon's first piece of evidence, his Exhibit A, comes directly from Scripture. He basically asks us to look at a key passage with fresh eyes and to resist that temptation to explain away what it seems to be saying so plainly. And to make his point, he uses this really powerful metaphor of a twofold cord. He argues that two promises were given together, divinely intertwined, like two strands of a single rope. And to untwist them, he suggests, is to fundamentally break the cord itself.
And here it is, the core of his argument. One strand of the cord is the promise of salvation for the soul, something pretty much everyone accepts as timeless, right? But woven right together with it is this second strand, a promise of miraculous signs. Gordon's challenge is simple. If they were given together, who are we to say that one is permanent and the other one isn't?
Gordon really drives this home by quoting the theologian Steer, who basically asks, if God delivered these two promises in the same breath, who are we to try and tear them apart? The logic here is that you can't have it both ways. Either both promises are for all time, or neither of them is.
Then Gordon tackles that common idea that these gifts were only for the original 12 apostles. He points to guys like Stephen, Philip, and Barnabas. None of them were original apostles, yet they were all performing miracles. His crucial point is that the promise wasn't for a few special people, it was for the entire believing community.
Okay, so this leads to a pretty obvious question, right? If the power for miracles is still available to the church, then where is it? Why aren't we seeing these things happen today? Gordon tackles this one head-on. Gordon doesn't shy away from this at all. He doesn't deny the lack of miracles in his time. Instead, he completely flips the script. The problem, he argues, isn't that the promise failed. The problem is that the church failed to claim it. And his answer is, well, it's pretty provocative. He says flat out that the promise hasn't failed, we have. In his view, the power is still there, but it's just lying dormant because it needs human faith to be activated. The failure isn't divine, it's human. He uses this really powerful parallel from the Apostle Paul. Paul once said, the law was weak through the flesh, meaning the law itself was perfect, but human nature was too weak to actually follow it. Gordon applies that exact same logic here. The promise of miracles is perfect. The weak link is our own faith. He backs this up by quoting another theologian, Bengel, who turns a common argument completely on its head. See, a lot of people thought miracles stopped because the church grew up and didn't need them anymore. But Bengel and Gordon argued the exact opposite. The lack of miracles is a sign of widespread unbelief, not mature faith. So for Gordon, the choice is really clear. You can either say that God's promise had some kind of secret expiration date, or you can admit that the church has failed to live up to its inheritance. He argues it is way more rational, and frankly safer, to just confess our own weakness than to suggest God has limited his own promises. Okay, so beyond scripture, Gordon builds his second major argument on logic and reason. He's basically asking, if we just accept that miracles stopped, does that even make sense when you compare it to everything else? His whole point is that we consider every other foundational part of Christianity, core doctrines, practices like baptism, spiritual transformation, to be permanent. Nobody claims those have expired. So why, he asks, would miracles be the one and only exception to that rule? It just doesn't add up.
To illustrate this inconsistency, Gordon paints this really powerful picture. Imagine two streams of blessing, and they're both flowing from the exact same divine source.
Okay, so one stream is for the healing of the soul, regeneration. Everyone agrees this stream is still flowing, maybe even wider and deeper over time. But the other stream is for the healing of the body. Gordon just finds it totally unreasonable to believe that this second stream, flowing from the very same source, was designed to just, dry up and vanish into the sand after just one generation? So, his conclusion from this line of reasoning is pretty blunt. The whole idea that miracles just gradually faded away simply doesn't fit the pattern. It's an anomaly. In his words, it contradicts all analogy, which makes it a logically inconsistent belief. So, having laid out his evidence from Scripture and his appeal to reason, Gordon brings his whole case to a close with a really firm and challenging verdict. See, he doesn't see it as some optional extra or a temporary boost for the early church. No, he defines it as a foundational inheritance, a birthright that has been neglected and surrendered, but never actually revoked. His core conviction here is that the past doesn't have a monopoly on God's gifts. There was nothing special about people in the first century that gave them some exclusive pass to this power. As Gordon puts it, the treasure house is not denied to us. The door is still open. And so, Gordon leaves his readers and us with this final, lingering question. He's made his case that the promise was never broken and the gift was never taken back. And if that's true, well, it shifts the focus entirely from the past to the present. It makes us ask, not about God's power, but about the nature of our own belief.